Hi, everybody. This is BJ Fogg. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk about sleep and sleep technology and provide the right, true insights and do some quick introductions. You'll learn more about me and us as we go along, but I'm BJ Fogg. I've been at Stanford since 1993. I'm an instructor running a research lab and so on. Now I'm affiliated with Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and I'm so happy to be moderating this. It's a topic I really care about. Joining me, also from Lifestyle Medicine, is Rachel. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thank you so much. BJ, it's so exciting to be here with you today on our inaugural webinar for Stanford Lifestyle Medicine. I am so thrilled about the topic as we were just talking about a little bit of sleep, a little bit of recovery, wearables, how we get to sleep, how we stay asleep, how we wake up. I've been at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine for about 2 years now. Prior to being on the West Coast, I was on the East Coast, where I did most of my training in nutrition, supplementation, skeletal muscle, and human performance. So this is right up my alley, and I'm super psyched to be here co-hosting with our guest, Dr. Cheri Mah. Dr. Mah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I am Dr. Ma. I am part of the Lifestyle Medicine group for about the last 2 years, but I've had a longer track record with Stanford, having done my undergraduate and my master's, and have stayed affiliated. And now I'm currently an adjunct lecturer for the Stanford Sleep Medicine Center. I will share obviously more about sleep and how you can optimize this area utilizing wearables today. And I'm just so excited to be here with you.
Very good. Okay, quick questions for all three of us. Number one, how did you sleep last night? I'll go first. Probably a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. Rachel and Dr. Ma.
So I use a device to tell me whether or not I slept well, and my device told me I slept amazing last night, which I have to say I wasn't really sure when I woke up, but I was pleasantly surprised. So I would give myself an 8, and my score was an 89. So I guess I had a B plus.
Okay. Dr. Ma, how'd you
All
sleep
right.
last night?
I give myself probably a 4 or 5. Reason being, myself a work in progress in this area. I have a 1-year-old who currently has a cold. So when you can't breathe very well at night, the little ones tend to wake up a lot through the nighttime. So I transparently didn't get the best night of sleep. So I'm also trying to figure out then some countermeasures with some caffeine this morning and maybe a quick power nap in the afternoon.
Super cool. Dr. Ma, what's the weirdest thing about being a sleep expert?
Oh, great question. I actually think the weirdest thing is that we still don't even understand and know exactly why we sleep. And I
Hmm.
think being a sleep physician in this area where this is like the central question we're still trying to understand is very fascinating to me, because we now better understand what happens if we don't get sufficient sleep and some of those negative consequences on our cognition or on our physiology. But we still are trying to understand exactly why every single
Yeah.
night we spend a third of our lives doing this fascinating process every day. And it's been ingrained in our DNA for eons. And it's not something that we think is really malleable at this point
Yeah.
that we can really adjust.
Okay, let's say you're at a party or a dinner or something, and you're meeting people and you explain that you're a sleep researcher and expert, and you work with athletes, Olympians with gold medals. Is that weird? Do they start tapping? You get sleep questions like the rest of the dinner. How does that go?
Definitely. Everyone is very open suddenly to sharing all of their interesting observations or questions about their own sleep. I get to know people pretty easily and quickly at lots of events.
That's great. All you all who are here, I'm so glad you're here. This is a really important topic to me and to us at Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Ma, I'm so glad you're here. Those of you that registered for this, we asked you to share why you were interested in this. And then we went through those answers, and there were a lot, and we processed them. But you want to improve your sleep quality and habits. You want to understand sleep wearables. You want to understand what the data means. You want to interpret the metrics, understand the latest sleep research, and more. But those were the top items. I would imagine most everybody here wants to sleep better. If you were awesome at sleeping, you would probably not be here. You would be doing something else. And I think I'm with you on that, y'all. I'm great at habits. I'm a habits guy. I'm really good at habits, but that does not mean I can get awesome sleep. I can't force myself to sleep. I can get myself to exercise and do things, but sleep is the result of other things. And it is quite a big puzzle to me. And that's one reason I was so excited about having Dr. Mah on this webinar and moderating it. Dr. Mah, tell us about the athletes that you've worked with. And I realize there's some things you can't share because it's held and confidential, but there are things you can. Tell us a little bit about the athletes and name names if you can, and give us specifics if you can about those athletes.
Sure. I've had a really unique opportunity to work with a number of professional athletes and sports teams to try to apply the science into practice and helping these organizations and athletes try to perform their best, leveraging circadian studies, trying to apply the sleep science in ways that will assist them when they're both at home and then when they're on the road. So at this point, I have worked with teams in the NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA. I won a Super Bowl ring with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017, which was a very cool experience. Here in the Bay Area, I worked with the San Francisco Giants for 8 seasons. I've had opportunities to work with the Warriors, Sharks, 49ers. More recently with the Olympics, I was working with Cheri Mah, who also was a former Stanford student. So
can I just say, I am the biggest fan of Cheri Mah, and my one regret is she did not take my class at Stanford. Tell Katie hi for me. I am huge of fan. Keep going.
All right, BJ, I will definitely let her know next time she missed out. But I got an opportunity to work with her for both the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and then also more recently the Paris Olympics, specifically looking at how can we optimize her travel and the various time zones that she would have to travel to, both for Olympic trials, then heading into Olympics and all the different sleep environments. So that was a phenomenal experience to get to work with her. And obviously she's done wonderfully through her whole career, but more recently getting to be
I fanboy for a minute on Katie. I was dialed into Katie even before she came to Stanford. Not only is she like an amazing swimmer, and then this isn't about sleep. We'll get back to sleep. She just seems like just a wonderful person. Every time she was on camera and spoke about her amazing victories, it was such grace and such generosity. I want to hear she's like that in real life. Is that true?
It is very true. She's a very wonderful person. She very graciously even brought her Olympic medals and showed me how to wear her gold medals and got to take a photo with her and them. And that's just the type of person she is. It's been wonderful to get to be a small part of her journey.
I am so glad and that you're helping her. Tell us about some of the sleep challenges Katie or other elite athletes face. Now, everybody here listening, I think we all like to think of ourselves as high-performing people. And I'm thinking there are things that we can learn from high-end athletes like Katie and other people you've worked with that translate into our lives of being high-performing people. What are some of the challenges that you see?
I think a lot of the challenges that elite athletes face are things that also many of us face even day to day. Yes, there are specific scenarios and schedules that are going to be specific to an NBA team playing games at the evening time, but a lot of the challenges around their sleep are, again, things that I think many of us experience day to day. So for example, racing mind is incredibly common. Being able to then have strategies so that you can process your thoughts from the day, think about what you need to do for the following day, and not have all of those thoughts swarming in your head when you're now lying in bed trying to sleep. And a lot of folks just don't have strategies or an intentional process every day that's built into the routine so that they're able to go through those thoughts and then be able to put them aside so that they can actually sleep for the night. So a racing mind is an incredibly common challenge and something that I work with athletes to try and make sure they have that period where they're processing their thoughts outside of bed before they actually start their wind down routine. And that's something I think all of us can definitely leverage.
How come they haven't done this before? When you think of these high performers, man, they've got head coaches, they've trained, they're great at probably discipline. You hear Katie talk about her training, it's just amazing. But they haven't been systematic about this before. Why not?
I think it'll depend a bit about where they have trained or come from previously and whether some of their coaches or their support staff have inquired if this is a concern. Because I will say A lot of the athletes I work with, this is the first time someone's really dove deeply into asking them about their sleep and what happens in not just the hour before bed, but in that evening period to prepare to sleep. And it tends to be a very private time. So it isn't always something that is openly discussed, or unless a coach is really inquiring about how is your sleep, it is sometimes the first time they really dive into some of those details when I'm asking about not just duration, but the quality of their sleep and the timing of their sleep, and whether or not factors like travel affect their ability to sleep well on the road, or there's areas for improvement. And that would actually be the second thing that I would say is challenging for athletes is travel. Many of them are flying across the country, crossing time zones, and therefore experience jet lag, which we've all mostly experienced from time to time when you're going into a different time zone and you have a desynchrony of your body clock. And many of them don't have strategies. So they get to the new location, try to adjust in whatever way they think will work, and then try to go out and perform. But really, that's not the best way to try be at your best. So something that I really try to advise athletes on is having a pre-flight plan, an in-flight plan, and a post-flight plan for strategies that will help you better adapt. And that's something I think all of us can do as well when we think about any travel that's going to incorporate time zone switching.
Can I hop in here? This is interesting to me because you may or may not know, my husband is one of the athletic coaches at Stanford. He is one of the rowing coaches, and they have a really off schedule really early in the morning. And one of the things that you said just a second ago, Cheri, was that the coaches might not prioritize it, or they might not know. And I actually feel like it's because they don't have the knowledge oftentimes themselves. So I'm wondering if you can just start maybe a little bit more at the beginning. How much sleep should we be getting? What's the optimal timing? And the reason I'm bringing this up is we've got some questions coming up in the chat here. Team, as you start to think about these questions, put them in the Q&A section. I'm going to be monitoring that and bringing it to Dr. Mah, but people are asking like, what is like, how much sleep? What's the baseline? What should we be getting?
Sure. Okay. So there is this like myth that everyone needs 8 hours of sleep. And I want to dispel that now, that we have individual differences, right? Like how much BJ you need every night is different from myself versus Rachel. And the 7 hours is the minimum threshold that is recommended for every adult to prevent health risks and performance decrements. And that's a recommendation from a consensus statement from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine several years ago. So that's the lower threshold. But you may actually need 8 hours or 9 hours or more to feel refreshed. And so I honestly feel terrible on 7 hours of sleep every night. I feel much more rejuvenated on 8.5 or 9 hours. So you do have to find what works for you.
How do you do that? How do you do? There's people in the chat that are like, how do I know?
It will take some time. Ideally, if you're going on vacation, say for a week, and you don't have the constraints of your work schedule so that you can actually sleep and let your body wake up when it naturally would be inclined to, rather than it being forced awake because of an alarm from other obligations in life, then you can start to see if every day you're consistently getting a certain amount of sleep that you then feel like you're refreshed when you wake up. You generally want to align that, if possible, with your chronotype. So that is what means some people are early morning people, some people are evening owls, some people are somewhere in the middle of that. But ideally, you would align your sleep schedule so that it coincides with what your internal preference would be. Yeah, I know it's a little bit challenging.
Well, I'm chuckling. I've been with my partner, my husband, for 30 years. The good news is we have the same chronotype. Why doesn't anybody tell you when you're young? That's your first filter on a long-term relationship. Because you don't want to, we have friends that are opposite, and I just don't see how they make it work. What are some of the, Dr. Mah, what are some of the sleep myths that surprise athletes the most when you say, and people here, what are some of the myths that are out there and that just aren't true?
There's a ton of sleep myths out there that hopefully I can knock out a couple here. One is that alcohol helps you sleep. So yes, it can help you fall asleep, but what really happens is it can really impact the quality of your sleep. So it can cause more awakenings during the nighttime. It can prevent you from going into rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep you might have heard about. This is when you typically dream. And you get more of that dreaming sleep in the early morning hours. And so people can wake up feeling more sluggish, more groggy. They've typically had more fragmented sleep during the nighttime. So alcohol is typically not your best friend for getting the best sleep possible. That would be one. Number two, I would say snoozing is harmless. I know a lot of folks will say, I love snoozing, and I keep hitting that snooze
Oh,
button
I
in the
agree.
morning.
I totally agree. I think you're sapping your willpower for the day every time you hit snooze. Anyway, Dr. Ma, back to you. Yes.
I fully understand the desire to hit the snooze button and be able to go back to sleep for 5 minutes. And if that's you, do it once and then start your day. What I think is actually preventing you from getting the best sleep possible is if you're trying to hit the snooze for a half hour, an hour every 10 minutes, because really what you're doing is fragmenting that last half hour, an hour of rest where you really could get consolidated sleep. And again, that's when you're getting a lot of that REM dreaming sleep that's important for memory consolidation.
I'm being that student in the classroom that I always was. Apple, why is your snooze button bigger than your stop alarm button on your interface? What's going on with that? It's like, that's the default. Apple, if you're here, please change that. Dr. Ma.
I've noticed that too. I don't have an answer for that.
A question. Wait, hold on, BJ. You mentioned that you are the same chronotype as your husband. Is that something people are asking about chronotypes and they want to know how they know what chronotype they are?
So there are standard assessments you can take that will at least filter through what your predilection is for being an early morning lark or evening out, or there's actually this group that's probably in between that. You don't swing strongly to the morning or strongly to the evening time. But I think generally you should have probably some sense going through life that you typically either are more alert and function better on the earlier side where you like to wake up in the morning and you tend to not want to stay up late. You want to go to bed on an earlier side, or you're a night owl and you know that you like staying up later. If you're having the opportunity, you would sleep a little bit later. And just keep in mind that this can also change through your life cycle. So when you're in your teenage years, you tend to be more delayed, that body clock naturally. So go to bed later, wake up later, and then you swing back to more normal body clock in your adult mid 30s, 40s, 50s years. And then when you get into the later part of life, sometimes that clock advances. And so you want to go to bed earlier and then go to bed and wake up a little bit earlier. But generally, people have some sense of when they function best and when they prefer to sleep.
Yeah. So let's say I'm a high performing person / athlete. Let's say I'm the Katie Ledecky of the future, and I come to you. What are my first steps with you, Dr. Ma?
One of the things that I first start with is actually taking a step back and asking, like, what are your goals and what is it that you are trying to, what is your podium, right? Whether you're an executive or a musician or in the military, everyone, I believe, has a different goal of what it is that they want to be their best at. And I think that will inform then what we're looking at in terms of trying to achieve that goal. I always get an assessment of what your sleep health is, and we want to know where you are as a baseline before we're making any adjustments or changes. And then, of course, trying to customize a plan so that you can actually start to implement small but gradual changes over time. That's my philosophy, is like small wins gradually over time will add up, and those really can make a huge difference, right? 15 minutes more sleep every day this week will be almost 2 hours more. And I think all of us can do 15 minutes. And that's the difference of an A student to a B student. 11 minutes is like a B student to a C student. I often do include a wearable. There was a, 2023 survey by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine that did say that nowadays about 35% of Americans have used a wearable, and 77% found that it actually was helpful. And around 68% thought that it did help change some behavior. So I do often incorporate a wearable into that, and then really try to target what other performance goals that we can track over time, and then integrating that into their lifestyle and their schedule, as well as the larger support system.
Like a lot of people here who want to get more and higher quality sleep, I definitely want that. With my wearables, it's frustrating to see how much time I spent in bed versus how much sleep I actually got. That drives me a little bonkers, to be honest. And it turns out I probably need less sleep than what I want to. I want to do 8 and 9, but maybe I don't need that. But there's something about the wearables that are both encouraging, but also discouraging for me, and especially HRV. And so the question is, which of those scores should I be paying the most attention to? I tend to look at deep sleep and HRV and maybe REM. I get tons of REM. I don't worry about that. But which for maybe not athletes, but people here listening, which are the scores or the metrics we really should be paying attention to?
The metrics that I use most frequently with my athletes is one, total sleep time.
Okay.
So while I do look at that time in bed, I really care more about how much objective sleep time were you getting in that time period that you were in bed. And so that proportion is what we call sleep efficiency, and that does
Mhm.
matter. So that's time of sleep over time in bed. It should be around 85%. And that's
Okay.
actually an important number because if you are spending hypothetically 10 hours in bed, but you're only sleeping 5 hours, your sleep efficiency is 50%. And so that means you're not at 85%, which is the goal. What is happening in your habits that is causing you to not be able to either fall asleep when you want or stay asleep during the nighttime? Because we need to get that efficiency to be better, right?
Okay.
Higher towards 85%.
But is it really more about the total sleep? Why does efficiency matter? My efficiency is not good because I'm trying to get more and more sleep, but there's hours uh, that I don't get credit for total sleep. Is it just I'm not being efficient, or is there something negative that I'm harming my health by being in bed and not asleep?
So I think it can depend, but the reason why we care about the sleep efficiency is because, as I mentioned, if you're a 50% sleep efficiency, I do get concerned you might have insomnia if this is something that is over multiple weeks to multiple months where you're not able to fall asleep for several hours or are awake in the middle of the night for several hours, not having the ability to fall back asleep appropriately. All of us will have a bad night here or there, and that's okay. It's more of, is that a trend over multiple weeks to months? And then otherwise, I think your question is asking, there is a harm to just being in bed, but not being asleep for that period where your sleep efficiency is, as an example, at 50%. Because it can be a very frustrating and vicious cycle that can repeat itself. And then people can not get great quality sleep when they're spending too long in bed. And that's one of the common mistakes for individuals with chronic insomnia.
Okay,
Trying to get
I
interesting.
have
more
a,
time in bed, but not actually sleeping.
I have a quick follow-up on this, and it relates to sleep efficiency, but also some of the breakdowns of the sleep stages. So, BJ, I'm so jealous that you get great REM sleep because I do not. My deep sleep and my REM, according to my wearable, is not good. I get a lot of light sleep. Should we be paying attention to those stages? Do they matter? We've got a lot of questions in the chat right now about how do we make deep sleep more, like how do we increase
Yeah.
our deep sleep? How do we change this? And are each of these wearables accurately measuring that? And a follow-up question to that is, are they the same? Are we comparing apples to apples, whether it's a ring or a watch or some other kind of device that you're wearing? So questions to summarize is sleep stages, what are they? Do they matter? Can we measure them? And is it consistent between the
Yeah.
different wearables?
Okay, great. Lots of questions here. I'll try to dissect. So you have different sleep stages at night, right? You have light sleep, you have deep sleep, and then you have REM sleep or dreaming sleep, and you cycle through that through the night. While yes, each of the stages are important, each of them have some different implications for why they are critical for each of us, right? The deep sleep, there's implications for muscle repair, recovery. The REM sleep, there's implications for memory consolidation, neuronal pruning. You tend to get more of that deep sleep in the beginning of the night. You get more of that REM dreaming sleep towards the end of the night or those early morning hours. Now, everyone gets really fascinated by some of the wearables and tracking how their sleep stages are. I will say that some of the studies that have tried to compare various wearables against the gold standard, which is in the lab with what's called polysomnography, where we're really looking with EEG at what stage of sleep you are truly in as the current gold standard, has shown that some of the wearables are not that accurate in specifically detecting certain sleep stages. They're
Okay.
more accurate, generally speaking, for total sleep time, bedtime, wake time, that sleep efficiency we talked about. So more when it's like that black and white, are you asleep or are you awake? Versus where there's been some more limitation is accurately detecting this is the amount of REM sleep that you're getting. And in particular, it's because, for example, REM sleep looks physiologically similar to when you're awake. Your heart rate is more variable, your breathing is more variable. So it often can be more challenging for the wearables to classify that specifically as REM sleep. So sometimes it gets classified as being awake. And so sometimes the time awake may be higher, or it can go into the other bucket of other sleep stages. What I think is actually more reassuring about it is that regardless of what your wearable may say about your sleep stages, is that our brains are actually very smart, and it adapts and knows what sleep stage you need based on the prior night of sleep, the prior week of sleep. So for example, if you only got 5 hours of sleep for the last week, your brain is going to say, okay, I need more deep sleep and I need more REM sleep. And so it'll rebound those stages faster than if you had gotten 8 hours of sleep every single day this week. So I think that's the reassuring thing, is regardless of what your wearable is saying, your brain is malleable and adaptable. And so it will force itself faster into these stages. And so that is, I think, a useful understanding of regardless of what your wearable may say. And our inability at times to really say X, Y, or Z will increase your deep sleep or your REM sleep, that your brain is going to do it on its own.
What you just said, when I listen to this again, I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to put that like on autoplay to reassure myself. My brain knows what it needs to do. So thank you so much for that. But even my husband gets more deep sleep than I do. I'm obsessed about deep sleep. So Rachel, I get the REM, but I'm obsessed about the deep sleep. Sometimes like 19 minutes. And when it's over an hour, I'm delighted. If I
BJ,
wanted to...
sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I was going to say the hard thing is that for men in particular, as you age, unfortunately, you lose more deep sleep as you get older. So you will probably not get that same very refreshing sleep as what you recall when, say, you were 20 years old. Unfortunately.
That's such a bummer.
Dang.
I know.
So
Okay.
sad.
But I think it's even more important than the variables that you can control, the timing of your sleep from your sleep schedule to many of the factors that affect the quality of your sleep, right? Your sleep environment, your alcohol, your caffeine consumption, your ability to have a dedicated wind down routine. Those things then will still hopefully help the quality of your sleep. And so even if you're not getting as much deep sleep, then at least having more consolidated sleep during the nighttime is going to be key.
Can we go to HRV? So
I was just going to ask about that.
HRV, yes, Rachel, you and I talked about this.
Yeah.
I will Whoop. So some of my students and friends have been involved in Whoop and still are, but I stopped wearing you because there's so much dependent on HRV scores, and I'd wake up and say, yo, you shouldn't work out hard today. I get HRV from my other devices as well. I'm pretty into it. My HRV is not great, working on it. Dr. Mah, how to think about HRV in these wearables, and should I take those scores very seriously?
Wait, before we get into that, can we just define for everybody what HRV is? Because I'm not sure everybody knows. So HRV is heart rate variability, right? Which is like the distance in between each of your heartbeats. So you actually want some variability in between your heartbeats, right, Dr. Mah?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So how does this relate to sleep? Go on. I'm dying to know.
Should I be obsessing about HRV? And
I will say that there's a fair amount of the elite athletes that do looking at their HRV trends over time and utilize that to consider whether or not they're more sympathetically versus parasympathetically driven in that balance. They tend to look at it over the week. And if there are dips in their variability, then sometimes they will try to do interventions to enhance their parasympathetic activity. And I don't personally look at HRV trends to make specific sleep recommendations. I look at that in the context of how they have been sleeping and what that situation looks like if they're traveling, if they've had other stressors for that week. And so I'll use that in context, but I don't specifically say, okay, the HRV is low, that we're going to change X, Y, or Z in their sleep plan.
Okay, got it. In preparing for this, you all, we said, should we name names and name products? And I think we should. Aura, Apple Watch, Whoop are three that Garmin. Okay, I haven't used the Garmin device. I find that each has strengths and weaknesses. And I don't think there's anyway, Dr. Ma, do you use sleep tech in your life? If so, can you name names? And what would you recommend to friends and family and why?
Sure. I do use various sleep tech, and that's from wearables to other types of sleep tools that I actually think are really helpful to invest in so that you can actually get more optimal sleep, whether you're at home or on the road. I am an Apple person. I am from Cupertino, so it's our hometown pride and joy. So I do wear an Apple Ultra, and I'm working with elite athletes. I will say in 2024, many of them have gravitated towards Whoop and Aura and Apple. I will say, generally speaking, some of the features they have liked, like the HRV trends and or some of the ability to tag some of their habits to actually understand some of the associations with their sleep trends over time. So those tend to be the ones that I would say the pro athletes have largely used in 2024. From other sleep tools and tech, I do think that they're helpful in specific situations. So when you're traveling, I say invest in a travel sleep kit. I build them out where there's earplugs, eye mask, light blocking stickers, curtain clips to keep the curtains closed, a travel white noise machine. Having these tools available so that when you're in a non-ideal scenario, at least you have some of these tools to reach for. If this is something that's interesting, I provide a starting point of various ones that I recommended if that's interesting to anyone. I would also say from a temperature standpoint, that is a common issue for a lot of my elite athletes is that they're very hot. And we know that cooler temperatures are better to fall asleep is when your core temperature drops. So one thing that has been really helpful is now there's these mattress covers. So 8 Sleep is one that allows then for faster temperature regulation from 55 degrees all the way up to 110. And they're independently controlled for 2 different bed partners. So you can actually regulate that temperature cooler and or warmer depending on your preference. And I think that's been a huge game changer for some of my athletes who run really warm, especially when they're playing late games in the evening time.
Can we tap into this temperature metric? Because so I'm going to call you out, BJ. I'm going to ask you what wearable you wear. And I'm going to be super honest. I'm an Aura person. I use it in my research. I have a relationship with Aura, so full disclosure. But it does track my temperature. And I've always been curious as to, is that meaningful night to night? It seems like a really small variation, like tenths of a degree. Is this something that I should be paying attention to? Like, how do I know if I run hot and can I actually measure that?
Oh, so sorry, I'll go ahead and answer that. So yes, so when you fall asleep, your core temperature drops, and that is a part of the natural process of when you fall asleep. I think what I experience with a lot of lead athletes is they will get sympathetically driven because they're exercising, working out, playing games late in the evening time, so their core temperature increases. But they often will need some time before they can allow that to drop so that they can sleep. And so they tend to run a lot warmer or perspire during the nighttime because of the relationship with when they're playing and or competing. I think, Rachel, to your question of is that important to track? I think most people probably not at the granular level. I think like you understanding whether or not you're comfortable and whether your ambient environment is conducive to sleep. A lot of people will make the mistake and have a much warmer environment. 72 degrees. Sometimes I've heard 75 degrees. 60 to 67 degrees has been studied in prior studies that has helped people fall asleep and stay more consolidated. Now that can feel frigidly cold for some. So I always say knock it down a degree and then see what works for you. But cooler temperatures tend to be more conducive to sleep. And then the one other thing I'll add in from a regulation standpoint is the timing of your shower or hot bath. A lot of people
just going to ask about this. Yes. Sauna, shower, cold plunge. Keep going on temperature. I'm so
keep
so
going.
is everybody else. There's a bunch of questions.
I need this.
So a lot of people make the mistake of doing that hot shower, hot bath right before bedtime. And I still love it as a way to relax, wind down, prepare yourself to sleep, use it as a wind down strategy, but you just want to do it 90 minutes before bed. Because if you do it right before bed, that is increasing your core temp, and that's competing with the signal for your core temp to drop when you fall asleep. But if you give yourself 90 minutes and back it up, There's studies, so it's called passive body heating, where then that's sufficient time for your core temp to drop, and then it probably augments that natural process. And the studies have shown that it increases deep sleep a little bit. These are smaller studies, but then also can help people fall asleep. So I think it's a useful tool to think about when you might have a challenging night or a lot on your mind. The passive heating with a hot shower, hot sauna is a great strategy.
What
Well, I
about
love that.
cold
I
plunge?
hadn't heard the 90
Sorry.
minutes thing before. How about a cold plunge? So yesterday we did a cold plunge about 2 o'clock, and I didn't see an effect on my sleep, but what would be the best timing for that?
Morning or afternoon? I'm not a
Okay.
fan of the cold plunge right before bed because it's going to sympathetically activate you. And then that's going to be not the state that you want to be when you're trying to actually wind down and sleep for the night. So morning or afternoon would be my preference.
So
Okay,
not a
got it.
cold shower in the evening. People are asking. So should we switch to a cold shower? So no hot shower 90 minutes before bed.
Yes, 90 minutes before bed, hot shower, hot bath, and avoiding the cold plunge in the evening time right before sleeping.
Dr. Mah, one thing so I'm a researcher, I'm a data guy. So on my own little N of one, looking at the scores I'm getting in sleep and other things, I adjust something, let's say the shower, the hot bath, and then I try to see if it shows up the next day. And I realize the sample size is just me, so I don't have much power in my analysis. But how can somebody find those causal relationships? That's the question, right? So now I have a way to measure it. It may not be perfect. I'm perfectly happy and great at trying out different practices, but drawing the cause and effect is just tough for me. Any tips on that?
Yeah, it's challenging because there's a lot of variables in our life. And whether or not, as you mentioned, as a scientist, you want to keep all those other variables consistent and just change one variable to really see if there's that cause and effect. I think that's just challenging in real life. I think it's still worthwhile to see if one intervention really does seem to improve your sleep. I would just recommend doing it for at least a week time, right? So that you have that consistency. A lot of folks' life is different on weekends versus weekdays. Some people shift their sleep schedules. And so you can actually get social jet lag on the weekends when you stay up later and then sleep in later. So that could affect what you're seeing on your sleep outcome measures. So give yourself a week to actually have just that one change. And I think it could be also worthwhile to come back and visit that intervention at a different point in the year too, because how people sleep in the summertime can look very different than say the wintertime, especially with weather changes, allergens, environmental factors, kids' schedules look very different. And so I think it's worthwhile to at least experiment with another time in the year because you might be surprised it could be different or similar.
Okay, I have a confession to make. Right now, I'm using 2 wearables that give me some sense of how I slept. I don't look at it first thing in the morning. So I decide not first thing, but eventually. And then what I'm looking for is good news. So my confession is whichever system gives me the best news, that's the one I believe. But part of me goes, oh my gosh, Apple. It could be Apple said I slept great and Aura terrible, or vice versa. And sometimes they're very different. Dr. Mah, how to interpret what to do when your devices give you a different result or a different piece of advice in the morning about whether to exert yourself or rest?
I think this is challenging because every wearable or now nearables that you may use to track your sleep, there's different proprietary algorithms. And of course, these can also continuously be changing as companies adjust or adapt them over time. If you're using multiple devices and you're having a discordant outcome in the morning, I would first say, one, what numbers specifically are you looking at? There's some summation scores that are trying to make it easier to pull these different variables together to give you some sense relative to each day, which can be helpful for some. But I might ask you, if you look down into the more granular data, such as like your total sleep time, is that actually consistent or has that changed in contributing to maybe that summation score? And then I would also say what matters more to me too, besides what those numbers may show, is how do you feel in the morning? And how do you feel like you had restorative, refreshing sleep? And has that changed from the prior days where your numbers may have looked a little different? And specifically, how do you function in the day? Because if you're refreshed and alert, functioning well in the day, and your scores may have said that it's a little different than what you had imagined them to be, I would be less concerned. And then specifically, does this happen over multiple weeks to months, right?
Yeah.
All of us can have a bad night of sleep and we'll be fine. And our wearable might not have the numbers that we would have wanted to say that we had the best sleep. But that's okay. There's limitations which we recognize for all wearables and technology. But really, how are you feeling in the daytime? And are you feeling refreshed? And is that actually the more important, valuable outcome that we want to focus on as well?
There's a couple of questions about one of the scores in particular that seems to be bothering people in the chat, and this is that restlessness score. So this is, I think, indicative. It's a different algorithm depending on what device you're using, but it's a lot of waking up, falling asleep, moving around, these kinds of things, whether or not you get up to go to the bathroom or anything like that. So a couple of questions that are coming in is, how do I help that restlessness score? And I think a really related question is, how do I get the hamster off the wheel at 3 o'clock in the morning? Because I think that's the little bugger that's making me restless.
Okay, great question. So as Rachel, you mentioned, probably depends on which device you're using, of what this restlessness, or maybe this might be partly the awakenings at nighttime that might be noted. Again, this may depend on how it's detected, but I will say, first of all, just know that awakenings can be very normal. And I want to normalize that, because I think a lot of folks think that you should just fall asleep at nighttime and be a rock through the whole night and then wake up in the morning. And that's not actually true. You do have these awakenings as you go through the different sleep stages and come out of your cycle. And you may consciously recall some of these and unconsciously not recall all of them. So just know that awakenings or some of that tossing and turning can be very normal. Now, obviously, this can be taken to a more extreme. And if this is happening on a regular basis and you're waking up at night, not being able to fall back asleep, and it goes on for multiple weeks to months, that could be of more concern. If you're awake for more than, say, there's this like rough estimate, 30 minutes in total during the night where you're not able to get back to sleep, then that might be a sign that you should talk to a sleep doctor to understand if there's an underlying clinical sleep disorder like restless leg syndrome, or sleep apnea actually causes a lot of individuals to wake up throughout the nighttime, but that they may or not recall these awakenings. And that, yeah, those could be a sign that you should speak with someone that is able to evaluate you further.
It's interesting. I feel like some of these devices are actually registering now as medical devices to help indicate that you have some kind of an apnea situation.
They do. So Samsung and Apple just announced, Samsung has been announced earlier, and then Apple more recently, that they do have now features to detect moderate and severe sleep apnea, which I think is huge and is going to be a game changer to just bring more awareness to individuals who may not be aware that this is happening, because not everyone snores and has a bed partner that can tell them that might be a concern for sleep apnea. Not everyone has a bed partner to give you observations that you're either stopping breathing or pausing breathing or choking during the nighttime. And so I think that's really helpful about these wearables that have now launched these features that are going to bring more to light that you should talk to your provider. It's not meant to replace proper diagnosis and treatment by a sleep physician. And the American Academy of Sleep Medicine was very specific about that. They did say in a consensus statement that these wearables can really help the clinician-patient interaction and understand some of these trends, but it's not to replace, obviously, diagnosis and treatment.
Sorry, BJ. I was gonna say, what's the indicative metric? Is it oxygen saturation? Is it heart rate? Is it restlessness? What is the metric that's helping us discern this?
I've seen on the Apple announcement discussing breathing disruptions, and I believe that's also what Samsung describes it as. I don't know the specific details of what metrics they're pulling in. I would assume it probably could include oxygen saturation, because we do recognize when you have these sensations in airflow, when you have sleep apnea, where your airway has some partial collapse or full collapse of the airway several times, typically throughout the nighttime, then your oxygen levels can tend to decrease. And that's part of typically some of the detection, at least in some of the clinical assessments for sleep apnea. So I can't speak specifically to the current consumer products, but I imagine that could be part of the algorithm. And then, Rachel, I want to answer your one question about what to do when you wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep. So there's something called a sleep reset strategy, where if you're awake, can't fall back asleep after about a half hour, 45 minutes, the recommendation is actually to get up, get out of bed, go to another room, do a relaxing activity for about 20 minutes that does not involve your devices, It's in dim light, something that's enjoyable. So I recommend journaling, meditation, breathing exercises, reading a real book. And by doing that, one, it will help build your sleep drive so that in 20 minutes, you hopefully be a little bit sleepier. And it breaks up that cycle of your brain and body recognizing that it's awake and cannot sleep in bed, because you really just want to keep your bed for sleep and sex alone, and that's it.
Okay.
And so you can tease that apart, get out of bed, and then come back to sleep. And that's a reset strategy.
Let me ask a very specific question. So I have a digital piano that I can put headphones on. So I will get up and play the piano sometime at night in the dark. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Is it?
I love it.
So you like that? Okay,
Yeah,
approved.
I love it.
Dr. Mah approved. I love that. Thank you.
I have
Yeah,
I
something
have a
that's
follow-up question, and
relaxing.
there are a ton of these questions in the chat that I feel like is related to restlessness and sleeplessness. Menopause, peri and post-menopause, women with hot flashes, with sleeplessness. Can wearables help with this? Should we be paying attention? And this seems like a really unique population set. Is reading the book or playing the quiet piano going to be helpful to this group? Because everybody is saying in the chat, this seems like a really understudied, but also really like important needs case here.
Definitely. There's a lot of women who struggle with sleep around perimenopause and through menopause. As you mentioned, hot flashes, insomnia, disrupted sleep. I will also throw in that women are 3 times more likely to have sleep apnea as you go through perimenopause and menopause, because you're losing that protection of that estrogen. And so that's something that isn't always recognized that can really contribute to disrupted sleep. So a lot of individuals who are in this particular phase of life, when they come to be evaluated for what they think is difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep from an insomnia standpoint, oftentimes we do get a sleep study and actually find that they have sleep apnea, because again, that change in their physiology can also contribute to these changes in their sleep. And so much of apnea is also just an anatomic and mechanical issue. And so this just layers on and then is another particular part of this phase of life that can be really challenging for sleep.
I think there's a bunch of other great questions from the audience here, and we'll get back to them. But before we go on, I want to ask Ann Friedlander, who is part of the leadership of Stanford Lifestyle Medicine. That's why we're here, Stanford Lifestyle Medicine. And I'm here because Ann invited me to be part of the team. Ann, say hello and explain a little bit about lifestyle medicine and what we're doing, and then we'll get back to some of these questions.
Great. Thank you, BJ. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you all for joining on an inaugural webinar. We're really pleased with the response. We're getting some great questions. I am tasked with introducing lifestyle medicine in a minute, so it'll be very brief. But since many of you, this is your first contact with us, I just wanted to explain that it's a new program at Stanford, relatively new, a couple years old, and we're housed within the School of Medicine. And I think what makes us unique, founded by Michael Fredrickson, but what makes us unique is that we have over 40 researchers and clinicians and educators who support our 7 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And our 7 pillars include movement and exercise, healthful nutrition, restorative sleep, that's today's webinar, stress management, social engagement, cognitive enhancement, and gratitude and purpose. And what brings all these experts together is this passion for sharing science-based and actionable information that you can use in your daily lives. So whether you're using it for yourself, your own health journey, or to share with your community, or to support your patients and clients, we have that information for you. And if you haven't checked out our website at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and we'll have the URL up at the end of this webinar, you should check it out. And you can see that we have blog information, we have newsletters, we now have webinars, woohoo! So more of those to come. And since we are Stanford and focused on education, we are developing some Stanford certificate programs that might be of interest to you, including one in the works for health professionals, so personal trainers, health coaches, anyone who might be interested in this information to support the professional development. And so we will have that out soon, so keep an eye out for that. And the last thing I want to say is that we are here to provide this information for you. So we're very interested in hearing what you want to hear about. And if it's within the purview of our 7 pillars, then we have an expert for you. And so we can put on webinars, we can put out newsletters. And so we are very engaged and want to hear what you want to learn about. So there'll be an opportunity for feedback in the follow-up questionnaire that'll come out after this webinar. And anytime you want to reach out to our website or whatever, we're here for you. So enjoy the rest of the webinar. I've loved this. And yeah, it's great to have you all here.
I'm going to add a little bit to that. And then Rachel, you're looking at the questions and we'll go to the most important questions. Think of it this way, y'all. At Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, we can invite experts like Dr. Mah or other experts you want to hear from, and we can talk to them just like this. So experts at Stanford, experts outside of Stanford, who do you want to talk to? Who do you want to hear from? What do you want to learn? Let us know, because being in Stanford Lifestyle Medicine and within Stanford, we're able to do this kind of thing. And we really want to do what interests you. So let's go to the other questions that people have, Rachel.
Thanks, Anne. It was so wonderful to hear from you. All right, so some themes of questions that we are seeing is, you mentioned neurables as a term, Dr. Mah, and there's a lot of questions about things that change your temperature, about things that are monitoring your sleep or might affect your sleep that are not necessarily attached to your ring or your finger. So can you touch on a couple of those other techs, maybe apps as well, that you think could be really helpful for people? And then I've got 2 other themes to come back to.
Sure. So there are the wearables, as Rachel just mentioned, that's physically either on your finger or on your wrist, on your body. Then there's the neurables, that are things that are not necessarily attached. They can be mattress pads that have built-in sensors into them that are now trying to provide those same outputs about your sleep. There are
Do you
other
have a
devices.
brand for that? Somebody asked specifically, is there a brand?
So 8 Sleep was one that I mentioned, is the mattress pad that is for the temperature control. They also have built-in sensors into that mattress pad to give you some of the same outputs that you would see in the wearables. I will say Sleep Number Bed is one that I will say some athletes have used, where it also has built-in sensors into that mattress, as 2 examples.
Okay, and then related to other things besides the actual wearables, there's a bunch of questions about supplements. And I warned Dr. Mah that I was going to ask this question because I am just very curious. I'm a supplement and nutrition researcher. What's the deal? Specifically, there's 2 that keep coming up, melatonin and magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing with melatonin and magnesium? Should we be taking them? Should we not? What's the dose?
So supplements, okay. There's a variety of supplements out there. I will say that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine doesn't actually recommend necessarily any specific supplement, that because the evidence there isn't strong evidence that they specifically help with sleep. So I will say that melatonin is one of the most commonly used sleep aids, and it is probably one that many have tried. You don't need, if you're going to use it, you don't need mega doses. 3 milligrams or less typically is all that's needed. A lot of the studies are on 0.3 to 3 milligrams.
Wait, did you just say 0.3? Because my gummy is 5 and it tells me to take 2.
Yes, you don't need those mega doses. Like the 10 milligrams, those are for very specific clinical sleep disorders that are not the current difficulty falling asleep. So you don't need the 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams. You really need 0.3 to 3 milligrams if you're going to use it. And it's not FDA regulated, so you want to be mindful of what source you're getting. And there's been studies to show that some have had 400% more of what has been on the label, right? And so there is something to be mindful about the source of where you're getting it. But the meta-analyses really show that using melatonin to help fall asleep in the same time zone only help people fall asleep about 7 or 8 minutes faster than a placebo, which is not that great, right? Where the evidence is actually stronger is using melatonin when you're crossing time zones, specifically eastward. So when you have to shift your clock forward, if we're on the West Coast, going to the East Coast forward, that's when melatonin can help to shift your body clock. And that's actually when you can use it about 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime for about 2 to 3 days, if you're going, say, 2 to 3 time zones.
Dr. Mah, and Rachel, I'm a huge fan of starting on time and ending on time. So we're going to work toward wrap up. But tell us about magnesium, and then we'll get into, each of us will have kind of a closing statement.
Sure. So magnesium also is not necessarily has strong evidence that it really can help with sleep. I will say that there's a fair amount of athletes that I work with that do use it and subjectively feel like that they have that benefit. If it's something that you feel has been helpful to you, I don't say necessarily stop, but it's not something that I particularly am recommending as the first stop. I think really focusing on your approach to sleep, specifically around a wind down routine, some of the daytime behaviors, and then thinking about goals and your duration, the quality and the timing is a better place to start. We know those are definitely going to give you a stronger foundation of sleep long term, more than any supplement or sleep aid.
Awesome.
Okay, I have one last question, BJ, and I think this can be answered
Okay.
very quickly. The final theme is, can you get too much sleep?
Ooh, there's a lot to unpack in that. I will say, generally speaking, no, because the context that this is typically asked is when you get one night of getting 9 hours or 10 hours and feeling more sluggish. And it's not that you overslept. It's typically you might have woken up at a later time in your circadian rhythm. You might have had accumulated sleep debt that you're responding to when you're actually getting that rest. So you really do want to pay back accumulated sleep debt, but it takes more than one night or weekend of quality sleep. In my studies, and specifically with athletes, I've been challenging them to multiple weeks, and that's where we see the performance benefit. The 9% improvement in free throws shooting, the 12% faster reaction time when we pay that debt back over multiple weeks. The oversleeping or getting too much sleep tends to be this temporary effect where they might feel a little sluggish in the first couple of days. Now, I will say that there's a caveat to it where some of the studies have looked at the 10+ hours, and there are other comorbid conditions like depression and other situations where some people can get a lot of sleep that is not particularly healthy.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, let's go into wrap-up mode, and each of us will take about 30 seconds, and I'll start, and then Dr. Mah, and then Rachel. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. One thing that I've put into the world recently is a song called Twilight. I've worked on the team. So this is to help you and families wind down. So if you want to hear the Twilight song, search Fogg and Twilight on Apple Music or Spotify. This is a PSA. This is the labor of love to help individuals and families get calm and put their worries aside. So check that out as part of your wind down routine for the evening. Dr. Mah, closing statement.
I will just say, I hope I have challenged you to make at least one change for better sleep tonight. Start with something small, whether it's 15 minutes of more sleep, or you'll set an alarm tonight so that you can actually target your bedtime, or even if it's 5 minutes of starting a wind down routine, something that you enjoy, that I hope I leave you at least challenged to make one adjustment, and let me know how it goes.
Awesome. Rachel.
I'm just going to finish off with a little share on where you can all get more information. So I'm the director of education here at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and I am absolutely thrilled for the material that we are going to be bringing your way. The way that we do this is that we ask you to share with other folks, right? So if you found this helpful, we are going to be posting a recording. You will get some information about how to access that, as well as a follow-up survey to let us know what experts you want to hear from, what topics within our pillars do you want more information on. And in the meantime, you can follow us at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine on Instagram and on the other social media platforms. Our website is here. Please subscribe to our newsletter. It is outstanding. It is some of the best content that you can get your hands on, written by true experts in the fields. And if you want more from Dr. Cheri Mah, she is on all the socials. She's an excellent follow at Dr. Cheri Mah, and share her information. She is a true expert on sleep. We want to be sharing all of the best information, and make sure that you are tuning into our future webinars where you get direct access to our experts. You can ask questions in real time, and we really look forward to seeing you in the future.
Dr. Cheri Mah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, thank you for attending. You are dismissed. Go off and have awesome
Sleep, everyone.